Happy holidays, everyone, and thanks for joining us as we take a brief look at how they celebrated Christmas in medieval times. Um, it's always been a curiosity of mine whether I would have enjoyed a medieval Christmas, and I can honestly say I don't know. Their customs were quite a bit different. They got better as time went on, in my opinion. But let's go ahead and take a look at how they got the way they got. In the late 4th century, the Romans had established the holiday of Christmas with their adoption of Christianity. They established it around the time of a couple of already existing festivals or holidays. Saturnalia was being celebrated at the end of December there for a week, and the festival of Sol Invictus. And so they laid down December 25th as being the day that Christendom was going to celebrate the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. And for the first few centuries, it was a fairly low-key affair. It was encapsulated in the church. You would celebrate Advent season much like you do Lent. You're going to be fasting and praying. And then, of course, it culminates with the midnight mass. And that's it. It's a church thing. It's a spiritual thing. You didn't have anything special with your family yet. There was no communal, other than the church. There was no real action going on. Once we get to the 7th century, though, we start to see the roots of what we would recognize as Christmas starting to be laid down. By the 7th century, Christmas had evolved into a 12-day celebration centered around the church, of course. Each day had its own meaning, and they're celebrating its own feast, its own day. So St. Stephen on December 26th, the Holy Innocents, December 28th. It was an entire season of celebrations. Now, of course, this was centered around the church. And on Christmas, they had 3 masses: midnight mass, dawn mass, and daytime masses. And the churches would have been extravagant. You know, normally, where the fairly dimly lit medieval world, the churches would have been filled with candles. And in the later Middle Ages, they started to get nativity scenes. You know, St. Francis of Assisi would have the live reenactments. They would have plays and pageants being performed outside the churches with the villagers all taking part and playing a part, much like we still do today. If you're a member of a church now, oftentimes you'll have the kids doing their Christmas play. And this was very important because at this point in our history, most of us couldn't read. And there was no television or internet or anything like that, obviously. And so this is where you learned the story. This is where you learned the story and the meaning of the story. And so you would, again, it's still very much centered around the church, the main core of the holiday. And you'll see it slowly kind of moves away from the church as time goes on. But even in the church, it's expanded. So that was the church. What was going on outside the church? Well, the Christmas season was very much like Thanksgiving. It was a big time for food. For the peasants, it gave them the chance to indulge a little bit. It's very much for, like most of us nowadays, if we were back in the medieval ages, we would have been peasants, despite, we all wanted to think that we'd be some sort of lord or whatnot, but chances are, we'd be peasants. And so it's kind of like our Thanksgiving dinner is in America now. It's a rare, abundant time where we can just eat like kings for those 12 days. Of course, the nobility would go insane with the excess, and even the monasteries would get into it a little bit. They weren't as insane as everyone else, but they were celebrating even then. Now, your average person back then didn't eat a lot of meat. Okay, it's expensive to procure because you had to, raising an animal, and you can only keep the meat for so long. And so we hear references to it now. A lot of goose was eaten back then. They would have a goose and slaughter it for the Christmas time. And the pork as well. They would have a lot of pork. And if you're really, really rich, you could have some beef. But this was a constant season of feasting and abundance. And your lord of your area was expected to feed his tenants, and everybody was required to be charitable. And your local parish would increase its almsgiving to try to help the less fortunate have their time of abundance as well. So I would kind of, if you're American or familiar with the American Thanksgiving feast, I would kind of equate it to that it was like a combination of our Christmas church service with 12 days of Thanksgiving style attitude. In the 12th century, another interesting tradition started to emerge, which was kind of an inversion of the societal hierarchies, both in the church and in secular society. And so, like in the church, you would have mock bishops appointed, and the choir boys would act as clergy. Okay, hopefully to better effect. Even in the royal households, we would have the lords of misrule. That was, selected in some way to preside over the Christmas celebrations and basically act as, king, like a king for a day sort of thing, over the celebrations. And it was a way that everyone can blow off some steam. The humor of seeing the king have to submit to a servant or a lower official, as the lower official commanded mock executions to those who offended him. And it was a way that everyone blew off steam. But there are limits to all this, just like at your Christmas party at work. You need to be very careful exactly how far you take that mocking, because there could be repercussions later. And you need to be very gentle in what you did. But this, started getting steam along with the other revelries, so it eventually turned into a very Romanesque, turning society upside down, combined with feasting and drinking and gambling, and eventually started to turn into a whole thing. So the church, as time went on, started to crack down on that. By the late Middle Ages, the church was starting to try to regain its control over all this and kind of limit the excess a little bit. Towards the latter part of the Middle Ages, though, this period of excess had started to wane a little bit as the Christendom as a whole grew tired of the excesses that they were seeing take place in the church and in the royal houses and whatnot, all in the name of, the tenets of their faith. The church itself started to focus its attention during this season on the Holy Family, and so largely about the humble beginnings of the King of Kings and how he entered the world in the same way the rest of us did, as a sweet baby. And so you start to see images and references to the infant Jesus pop up all over the place in art and in nativity scenes, and baby Jesus becomes the reason for the season, if you will, and it remains this way even today, at least in the Christian celebrations of the faith. And it also, the Reformation's going on at this time, okay, and so we're seeing kind of a refocusing. Instead of concentrating on using the birth of Jesus as an excuse to indulge uh, and get it out of your system, I guess, is starting to be refocused back onto the story itself. And in some the newly founded Protestant areas, because of Christmas's reputation to be a period of extreme excess, it was not, the celebrations were banned entirely, just out of fear that people would start up again, basically. As you're celebrating your holiday this year with your families, and I hope you have the best one ever, take a moment to reflect on how we got to this point, and especially when you hear the song, The 12 Days of Christmas. Whereas now, Christmas is a cozy, quiet time that you spend with your family, for medieval Christians, it was not cozy at all. It was a cosmic, communal, and disruptive event filled with candles, noise, ritual, and belief. Thank you for joining us. Like and subscribe.